All right, let's get into a story that seriously sounds like it's straight out of a legal thriller, but it's all true. This is a case about a single house and a legal battle that it sparked for more than 30 years. Okay, just picture this for a second. You buy a home, you raise your family in it, you build a whole life there. Decades go by, and then, out of the blue, someone shows up at your door with a court order from 30 years ago claiming that your house is actually theirs. I mean, that's the stuff of nightmares, right? Well, for the Chavan family in India, this wasn't some hypothetical scenario. This was their reality. A real-life legal saga that would go on to challenge the very foundations of property law, pitting their entire life's investment against a piece of paper. A court decree from a long, long time ago.
So, to really understand how this all went down, we're actually not going to start at the beginning. Now, we're going to jump right into the middle of the action, to the day it all came to a head.
So, the date is January 18th, 2019. We're in Pune, India. A man named Hemchandra Bhansali shows up at a house, and he's not alone. He's got court bailiffs and police with him, and in his hand, he's holding a possession warrant. This is it, the final step in a legal journey that he began a lifetime ago.
And right here, this is where the conflict just becomes crystal clear. On one side, you have Mr. Bhansali. He's the decree holder. The court said he was the rightful owner way back in 1990. But on the other side, you've got the Chavan family. They've got their own official sale deed from 1995. They've lived in this house for more than 20 years. So when the bailiff tried to enforce the order, the Chavans refuse to budge. They resist, they obstruct, they will not leave their home.
So, this brings us to the big question, right? How can both of these people have what looks like a totally legitimate claim to the very same property? Well, to figure that out, we've got to rewind. Way, way back.
You see, the root of this whole mess goes back to a tangled web of property deals, a series of transactions that basically created a legal time bomb, just sitting there, ticking away, waiting to explode decades down the line.
Okay, so this timeline really lays out how this whole crazy situation happened. Stick with me. It all kicks off in 1973. Hemchandra Bhansali agrees to buy a plot of land. Sounds simple, right? Well, fast forward to 1986, and the seller suddenly backs out. So Bhansali does what anyone would do. He sues to make the sale go through. Now here's the kicker. In 1987, while that lawsuit is still going on, the original seller goes and illegally sells the exact same land to someone else. In 1990, the court finally rules for Bhansali, our original buyer. But the damage was already done. Because a few years after that, in 1995, the Chavan family, who know nothing about this legal drama, buys a piece of that land from one of those illegal buyers.
So, with all these different sales and lawsuits flying around, you have to wonder, how on earth does a court even begin to sort this out? Who's the real owner? Well, it turns out there's a really old and really powerful legal rule that's designed for exactly this kind of mess. The whole case, and I mean all of it, hinges on two little Latin words, lis pendens. It just means suit pending. And the idea behind it is actually pretty simple. Once a property is part of a lawsuit, you can't just go and sell it to somebody else to mess with the court's decision. Any sale that happens while a suit is pending is basically at the mercy of whatever the court decides in the end.
Here's a good way to think about it. The second Bhansali filed his lawsuit back in '86, the law basically planted a giant, invisible warning flag on that property. It's not like it physically stopped the seller from making a deal, but what it did do was attach a huge risk to that land. Anyone who bought it was also buying into that lawsuit. They were essentially placing a bet that the original seller was going to win in court.
Now, for this lis pendens rule to kick in, there's basically a 4-point checklist. And in this case, every single box was ticked. Was there a real lawsuit pending over the property? Yes. Was it a collusive suit, like a setup? No. Did one of the people in the lawsuit transfer the property? Yep, the seller did. And did that sale mess with the rights of the other person, Mr. Bhansali? You bet it did.
So after decades, literally decades, of battles in the lower courts, it all came down to this. The final showdown at the Supreme Court of India. This was where the Chavan family would make their last stand.
The Chavan family's argument, it really came from the heart. They said, look, we were innocent buyers. We bought this in good faith. We had no idea about some old dispute. We shouldn't lose our home because of a fight that we had nothing to do with. And you can see their point, right? But the court, well, the court's decision was based on cold, hard law. They said that the moment the seller was sued in '86, his legal title to the land got tainted. It was subject to the lawsuit. So the person he sold it to in '87 got that same tainted title. And that means that Chavans, when they bought it in '95, inherited that very same risk.
So you might be asking,
Why is this rule so incredibly strict? I mean, why couldn't the court just make an exception for this family? They seem like innocent victims here. Well, the answer gets to the absolute core of how our justice system has to work.
The court was crystal clear on this. Any purchase made pendente lite, that's just the fancy Latin for while a suit is pending, always takes a back seat to the court's final ruling. It's just ranked lower. And claiming I didn't know, well, that's not a defense that holds up. In fact, it turns out Mr. Bonsale had actually filed a public notice about the lawsuit way back in 1986, which made the whole thing a matter of public record for anyone who looked.
And this is really the whole point. This rule isn't just some legal technicality. The Supreme Court laid it out. This is about public policy. Just think about it. If you could just sell off property that's being fought over in court, what would be the point of even going to court? A defendant could just keep selling the property to someone new, and then someone else. And the plaintiff would have to start a new lawsuit every single time. It would be endless. The entire system would grind to a halt.
So after wading through 30 years of legal paperwork, filings, and appeals, the Supreme Court delivered its final word, and there was no room for interpretation.
Just look at this number, 33. That's the number of years between when the court first made the sale official for Mr. Bonsale back in 1993 and the final deadline the Supreme Court set for him to actually take possession in 2026. 33 years. Think about that. That's an entire generation spent waiting to get what the court said was rightfully his.
And the final order was just that, final. The Chauvin family's appeal was dismissed. They were ordered to vacate the property, to pack up their lives, and hand over possession to Hemchandra Bonsale. The deadline, February 15, 2026. And just like that, their decades of living in that home were coming to an end.
And then, to make absolutely sure this was the end of the line, the court did something pretty extraordinary. It issued a directive saying that no other court, anywhere in the country, was allowed to even listen to any more applications or petitions about this case from anyone. It was basically a judicial mic drop, a final, absolute end to the delays.
So this whole story leaves us with a really tough question, doesn't it? On the one hand, this rule, lis pendens, is this powerful shield. It protects the entire justice system from being undermined and stops people from getting cheated. But, as we just saw, that shield can cause some serious collateral damage. It can have absolutely devastating consequences for people who, through no real fault of their own, just get caught in the crossfire. It really makes you wonder, where do you draw the line between absolute justice and simple human compassion?